Hello and welcome back to D20 Sundays, and as always, I'm your host, Ian, the part-time Dungeon Master. Welcome back. I figured this one was on another thing that I kind of just forgot to go over, at least in detail, which is actually playing Dungeons & Dragons. What do you do? How do you play? Well, first, you need to roll up your character, which this is the same one from the last video, and then you make sure you have your player's handbook, as well as you have other players to play with. I normally suggest a 4-player team with 1 Dungeon Master, but that's my suggestion for beginners. Whatever you want to tackle, that is how you should tackle it. But you need at least 1 person to have the Dungeon Master's Guide. It, in its bindings, holds every rule that you need in order to run Dungeons & Dragons, at least being the Dungeon Master. But you as the player, you have your own rules that you also need to follow. First and foremost, don't be a dick. That's pretty much the golden rule when it comes to any game. Don't be a dick. Don't be that guy that ruins the fun for everyone else in order to have fun for themselves. So, the Dungeon Master, though, he is your story guide. He is your narrator. He is the one who lays out the land and tells you how your actions impacted it, and perhaps even influenced other characters out there in the world. There are many different types of ways of playing Dungeons & Dragons. That's the fun part about the system and how it can easily be changed and made into a new way of playing. I've seen people use it as a form of like doing Pokemon games, as well as crime empires and even mafia-like games. But today, though, we're talking to you as the player as to how do you play Dungeons & Dragons. Well, starting from just our basic character sheet, this level 1 cleric that we rolled up last time, I got a few dice out that are generally associated with what we're able to cast. A D6 for our mace, a D8 for our light crossbow and our cure wound spell, a D4 for our healing word and our bane spell that we use to make it a little tougher on our enemies, and the D20, which everyone needs. No matter what class you are, you will need a D20. The other dice, it will vary based on your class, your abilities, your weapons, and so on. So, the mighty D20, the symbol of Dungeons & Dragons, and a lot of mediums such as coffee mugs, t-shirts, and so on. The D20, often known as, well, the dice that decides. A lot of Dungeon Masters keep a few of these that they cherish and favor over other dice. And a lot of players do as well because they get superstitious and they don't like some dice being touched by certain people. Now, as far as playing Dungeons & Dragons, you just need to find a set that you like. It could roll good, it could roll bad. Preferably rolls good, but it could roll bad. Just so long as you like playing with those dice, that's what matters. When it comes to interactions with fellow party members, for the most part, once again, don't be a dick is the standard rule, and being respectful of each other and clear communication is very important. This is all primarily covered in the Session 0 videos, as the Dungeon Master is laying down the rules for what they expect in their campaign, or what they will or will not tolerate at their table. It is also to note that this D20 that I've been holding here is going to be determining all of your abilities. In the sense by that, I mean, whenever you want to make a check, say you're trying to jump over a gap, well, that would be an acrobatics or a dexterity check. So we'd roll a D20, got an 18 on the dice, that's pretty good. Our dexterity is 0, and we're not proficient in acrobatics, so it's going to stay 0. So an 18, I hope we made it over that gap. Next, though, is our saving throws. You see, the saving throws is your ability to withstand something hitting you or attacking you. Say you drink a poison and now you're worried that that poison is going to perhaps weaken you in some form. Well, in order to resist a poison, you make a Constitution saving throw. An 8 on the die. That's not too good. We got a +3 Constitution, and we're not proficient in it. If we were, it would be a +5. But a +3, that puts us at 11, so if it's a low-end poison, we might be good. Next is our skills. So our skills, which we went through when we made this character, we already marked off in the circles which ones we were proficient in. By proficient in these, we get our proficiency bonus. But say we're trying to handle animals, that would be wisdom, and since we're not proficient, it's just a straight 3, the same as our ability score. Always roll with the D20 and then add your abilities. Have these numbers filled out ahead of time so that way you know what they are, and make sure that you go ahead and add your proficiency bonus to any skill that you're proficient in. Next, we're going to talk about combat. So combat is normally a very big part of Dungeons & Dragons. You have different kinds of encounters out there. Sometimes you can get through an encounter without combat, which is perfectly fine and quite honestly acceptable at times, depending on your Dungeon Master. But being able to get through an encounter successfully, that's what truly gives you the experience points that helps you level up and so on. But say you have no choice but to fight. Well, once again, the D20 is going to be your guide. Essentially, it is going to be considered your chance to hit. You have to meet the armor class, or exceed the armor class, of whatever creature you're attacking. Say the armor class is a 14 for a standard bandit. So you're going to roll a D20. We got a +5, and we're trying to hit him with our light crossbow. So we're shooting from a range. And with only a +2 to hit, that's a 7. That crossbow bolt goes wide. Now, if it did hit, we would then roll the corresponding dice of a D8, which would just be 4 points of damage. Now, it's often good, and I've seen this in a lot of campaigns and guides and stuff, is that you roll the to-hit die, which is your D20, and the damage die, in this case the D8, at the same time. A 4, well, it didn't hit, so we don't have to worry about this. But wow, this dice is not cooperating with me. It rolled a 3. But let's say it landed on a 19, and it did hit. Awesome, we already know what damage we're doing. And say we're trying to heal someone. Well, since we're a cleric, we're pretty good at healing. In fact, we're possibly one of the best classes for it. So, we're going to cast Cure Wounds on one of our allies. That's a 4 on the die, plus our our Wisdom modifier, which is now 7 for a total healing, but also we have Disciple of Life, which adds 2 plus the spell level, so that's a total of 10 back to our comrade. At level 1, that's pretty much full hit points for someone. Whew. Now, it's on to the last part of combat, the death saves. Now, a lot of people are trying to figure out, what are the death saves for those who are new to Dungeons & Dragons? Well, don't feel bad. These didn't exist in previous editions. They only exist in 5th edition. Essentially, if you're rendered unconscious, which is when your hit points hit below 0. Now, let me be clear. If your hit points go to negative past your maximum hit points, so at level 1 with 11 hit points, if I take damage that puts me at negative 11 or negative 12 or higher, then I am just dead outright. It's called death by massive damage. And it can happen, especially at lower levels. So what you do then is not get hit by that. But if you, say, get dropped to negative 10, then you immediately jump up to 0 and you just fall unconscious. That's the good part about this spell, or this part of massive damage. Now, on to the bad part, which is the death saves. You essentially have 3 chances, well, at most 5, honestly, to get up or die. So you have to get 3 successes in order to get back up, or 3 failures and you die. That being said, all you do is roll a d20. That's a 4, that's a failure, and that's it. You have to roll a d20 and hope you get over a 10. Anytime you get over 10, that's a success. That's 9, so that's another failure. Whoop! That's a 4. And good old Grudar, unfortunately, is dead. But that's how it is. Now, another thing to note is that while you are unconscious and on the ground, you are prone, meaning melee attacks have an advantage against you, and they will crit. This is very important to note, as you are helpless. And that's the reason why they'll crit. And if you take a crit while doing death saves, well, that's 2 automatic failures. So that's even more so, you're likely going to die. Downing a player in 5th edition is a little bit harder because of how the spells and all the mechanics work. So it's a little harder than in previous editions to get a player to fall to 0 hit points. However, it's a lot easier to kill them once they are at 0 hit points. So that's something that you need to keep in mind. And if you ever see one of your players go down, you need to help them as quickly as possible. You, even if you're untrained, can make a medicine check. 15. That is, well, 10 plus our proficiency, which is 15, or 5, so it's a total of 15. That is enough to give them a success and stabilize them to where, hey, they're not going to die and they don't have to make any more saves. So that's something key to keep in mind. Whew. So now that we've gone over combat, how do you play Dungeons and Dragons when you're not in combat? Well, you play as your character. You think, and you can if you want, talk like your character would. Perhaps Grudar, this dwarf cleric. Perhaps, since he's always trying to find common grounds to meet peace with people whenever the party starts fighting, he'll be the first to intervene and be like, hey, hold on now. Oh, come on, we can't be fighting now. We're just having some fun. There's no reason to fight now. We've got adventures to do. And, perhaps he hides his brand of heresy that he was given unjustly, mind you. But yes, when you're not in combat, you play and think as your character. Your character doesn't know everything in the world. Your character doesn't know about certain creatures that are from faraway lands that they never would have met. Your character is its own person, and you are simply assuming their role. You're assuming their personality, traits, and so on, just for a short amount of time. It's like you went up to theater and you wanted to be on stage, and so you're on stage and you're playing out your part, and you're doing your best to be that character. Say you're doing a high school rendition of Hamilton, and you are Hamilton up on that stage. That's essentially what Dungeons & Dragons is. It's like a theater act, and everyone is agreeing to the same rules. Everyone has a role to play, and not everyone knows the script. So they have to act what is within best interest of their character. I guess the best way, other than that, I can explain it is, remember when you were kids on the playgrounds, and you were playing with other kids, and you were always playing pretend, and there was like, I got a force field. That doesn't work on me. Well, this is kind of getting rid of that force field. This system and everything in Dungeons & Dragons is essentially you guys back on the playground playing imagination with a set of rules that everyone agrees to. This is a set of rules that everyone can read, they can follow, and they agreed to follow, and they're not going to break those rules. Anyways, thank you for joining me for this D20 Sundays, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Laters!